It's the Brad and John Show.
It is the Brad and John Show. Good morning to you. We do this live every single morning, Monday through Friday, 7 to 8 o'clock Central Standard Time. And this is December 4th. This is the C block, which means approximately from 7:40 to about 8 o'clock. Or if I really want to drive John nuts when make him late for his carpool duties, we go to like 8:02 or 8:03, sometimes even 8:04, and John just goes nuts over that, right?
Hey, we could go to at least 8:02 today, Brad.
Okay. I saw this story the other day, which I thought was sort of interesting. And once again, years ago, there's two terms I'll throw out, NIMBY and cave. And you know what a NIMBY is, right?
Yeah, not in my backyard. But I don't know what cave is.
Cave was taught to me by a guy who used to be on the city council in O'Fallon. And we're talking about NIMBYs, not in my backyard. And he said, well, there's a second category, which is even worse. Cave is citizens against virtually everything. And I
see. Yeah.
He said that if, he didn't use the example, I'll use the example, but he gave the sort of a different example. But the example would be, let's say the city of O'Fallon found out that they found a safe that was buried. They're building some new building, and they found a safe that was buried, and it had like 10 tons of gold in it. And they decided they were going to take the gold, and they're going to sell the gold, and they were going to come up with, let's say $50 million, and they're going to give each citizen in the city of O'Fallon $10,000 bonus money. They're going to divide the money up against citizens. He said people would be at the city hall complaining about that. We think it's terrible that you're giving us $10,000. In other words, they're going to complain about everything, okay? So I go through this with towers, and I'm currently going through this right now in full disclosure with this. And what's interesting about this is people want their cell phones to work, but yet they don't want the towers. You know what I mean? It's to the point where it's like, okay.
I do know, yeah. You mentioned this as it relates to the red tape and getting a radio tower.
Oh my God, it's crazy. Okay, here's the interesting thing. This is a story out of, and this was originally on Fox Business, and someone sent me this and found it fascinating. Alaska Air and Delta are targeted in Seattle Airport pollution lawsuit. The lawsuit targets the two airlines claiming they operate about 80% of the flights at SEA-TAC Airport, thereby causing most of the pollution. First paragraph. A class action lawsuit against Alaska Air Group and Delta Airlines about the effects of aircraft emissions near the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport is moving forward as plaintiffs allege that pollution has caused physical harm, death, and property damage. The lawsuit was allowed to move forward after a Seattle federal judge rejected the airline's bid to have claims from Washington residents tossed according to court documents. Residents in the lawsuit describe a 5-mile radius around the airport. Now let's take a look at that. If you drew a 5-mile radius around, and they're saying the 5-mile radius is the, quote, contamination zone.
Oh, yeah.
So if you take a 5-mile radius around St. Louis Airport, back in the old days, when I used to fly helicopters, you don't hear this too much anymore, there used to be what they called the TCA, the traffic terminal control area, TCA. It was a 6-mile radius, okay? And we could not enter that 6-mile radius as our helicopter traffic reporters without permission from the tower. We had to contact the tower, and most of the time they'd let us through, but sometimes they wouldn't. If on Friday afternoons it was really busy, they would say, stay clear at the TCA. Okay, if you figure in St. Louis, a 6-mile radius of the airport was almost all of 170. There was a little tiny section of 170 on the south end, north of Highway 40, that was not in the TCA. So in other words, all the way down to Highway 40. So you're looking, if you're taking the radius, you're looking at Clayton to the south, Ladue, all the munis up and down 170. And the 6-mile radius went way up into North County. Matter of fact, I don't think you could, if we skirted the TCA on the north side, we'd actually run up against the Missouri River way up there. On the northeast portion, the TCA started at Newhall's Ferry. On the west side, it started at the Blanchette Bridge, and on the east side of 70, it started at Goodfellow. Okay, so that in St. Louis terms, bring that in a mile. That's what the Seattle residents are claiming is a contamination zone, which is what, hundreds of square miles, something like that? I mean, it's got to be at least 50, 60.
It's ridiculous, yeah.
Right, and I don't know how many, 1,000 acres, maybe tens of thousands of acres. And they say The lawsuit was originally filed in April of last year and alleged that pollution of air through carbon monoxide, lead, and particulate matter was causing hundreds of deaths and birth complications each year. Quote, when planes take off and land from SEA-TAC Airport, the jet fuel they burn spews pollutants into the atmosphere, the suit stated. Particulate matter can also flake off from the bodies of the airplanes themselves during flight, further contaminating the surrounding environment. I'm saying to myself, what particulate matter falls off airplanes? Now, occasionally, a piece of an airplane would fall off, right? We've seen that where, you've seen engine cowlings and things like that. And supposedly, every once in a while, you see the infamous blue ice that hits somebody's house or something. You know what the blue ice is, don't you?
No, I don't. Is this like a chemtrail, Brad?
No, you don't know what blue ice is?
I don't know. I've never heard of it. Oh, is it something from like a toilet?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, yeah. It's like when something from a toilet drops. That's disgusting.
Right,
okay.
that's the blue ice. Because once again, when you're up at like 30 or 40,000 feet, the temperature up there is like freezing cold. It's like super cold. It's like way below zero. And, things that come off an airline, they turn into ice. And then, it's a whole crazy thing. Essentially, that's how hail's formed. Hail comes down as rain, and the wind pushes it back up, and it comes back down again. And every time it comes up and down, up and down, up and down, that's what makes the hail bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. If you have a tremendous updraft, the stuff keeps going up. It gains more moisture. It freezes, then it comes back down again. So they're saying particulate matter off aircraft. Okay, I have no idea what that would be. I mean, do you have any idea what that would be? Particulate.
No.
See, now,
well, I don't know. Would it be? But I mean, is there some way for exhaust to be dirty and then freeze and then come down? You're the meteorological expert.
Well, John, the aircraft nowadays are, if you go back and look at old movies of planes taking off, 707s, they have a distinct, exhaust trail. And this is not a chemtrail. It's like black smoke. It's like if you go back and look at old movies of like diesel buses and diesel trucks, there's great big plumes of black smoke coming out of the stacks, okay? Most of these, and matter of fact, there are aircraft. One of the guys I follow, Cletus McFarland, you always make fun when I bring up Cletus McFarland. Cletus McFarland bought an aircraft, a private jet, corporate jet. It was one of the original Gulfstream jets, and he paid like $15,000 for it. Okay, once again, this is a jet that News sold for, $5-10 million. Okay, it's not wrecked. There's nothing wrong with it other than the fact that it's illegal to operate in the United States because it has the old engines in it. You can't use those old jet engines anymore for pollution reasons and for noise compliance. And essentially to retrofit this aircraft with newer, state-of-the-art, improved pollution and noise environment aircraft engines would be like, I think they said like $1 million or something like that. Most of the jet engines now are super clean. And see, that's what's sort of frustrating to me, because I'm a true believer that these EPA jerkazoids and the Democrats who are pushing this global warming thing, it's to the point where I can see these bureaucrats sitting in Washington, D.C. saying, you know what, we've really cleaned up the environment. If you go back and look at the particulate matter what diesel engines, did 30 years ago, and you look at the carbon, all the different stuff that came out of tailpipe emissions of cars 30, 40 years ago, my God, if we clean things up, but we're not happy. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Yeah.
They just, there's like, it's like the classic example of an engineer who runs a company. And if the engineer still has his engineering, and if he's producing a product, the product is never ready for production. Get what I'm saying? There's always an improvement. There's always something if we do this, we can make it just better by tweaking this. And the guy in marketing has to come along and said, dude, it's a great product. Let's put it out on the market. We'll see if it sells. And if it sells well, then we'll come out with version 2, and then you can charge.
The concept of the first viable prototype, the first viable product.
Right, exactly. But this thing is like, once again, who's behind this? I mean, once again, it's in Washington State and it's in Seattle. So you can sort of imagine the neighborhoods around there. Okay, we've talked about this before. It bothers me to see what happened with Bridgeton, because there was no excuse for what they did to Bridgeton. Matter of fact, if we'd get, do you think we'd ever get, you say never, but do you ever think we get our Senator Schmidt on here to talk about this?
I don't know if I would want to call that in. I mean, I don't know. We could talk about it off the air. Like, if it's important enough to you, we could make it happen.
No, I would just think it would be interesting to hear from his standpoint of him being a Bridgeton resident and having experienced that firsthand, how he looked back at what happened to Bridgeton. Do you know what I'm saying? And not and not necessarily as a legislator or a senator or anything like that. Just like Joe, average guy who's going like, God, Bridgeton was a great place. And once again, I have friends, because it wasn't, there was part of that, I think, it was in the Hazelwood School District. I think part of that's in Pattonville. But I had friends that lived in that area out there. And that was the first, you talk about all these planned communities that people talk about, oh, there's this new community where they have walking trails and they have a, you know what I'm talking about?
I do like the Newtown model.
Right. And that community, what was the name? Was it? Come on, help me with this, John.
Bridgeton Air Defense?
No. The area just west of 270. There's still parts of it that are just abandoned streets out there now. And now the airport's talking about they're going to put in all sorts of intermodal shipping stuff like their distribution centers and stuff. Carrollton.
Yeah.
Okay. If you look at the original maps of Carrollton, it was a huge development. And it had its own swim club and stuff like that. And it had, it was way ahead of its time. And the city of St. Louis just came along and said, we're going to annex all this property. And they did. And they tore down all the houses. I mean, and to me, that still bothers me because of the fact that I always give this example, and I know people heard me talk about this before. Fly into Midway. You've flown into Midway before, right?
We've talked about this. I don't think I've flown into Midway before.
John, if you look at a map, you go to Google Maps and you look at Midway Airport. Midway is a square. It's literally a perfect square. And there are subdivisions on three sides of it. On the east side of it, I don't believe I think that's industrial. But on the north, the west, and the south side of Midway Airport, there are some people, there are houses that you can see that are probably 400-500 feet from the end of the runway, okay? And at Lambert, even though they extended W1W, whatever what's now known as what 1129, I think 1230 are the two parallels, and this should have been the third parallel. They should be 112.
Okay, we got it.
Anyway, the third parallel. If you look at the end of that runway, it's a good half mile away from where Carrollton is. And, once again, look at Midway. People, well, that's old school. Well, what about these people in Midway? Are they going to file a lawsuit against Chicago because of the fact that we're 400 feet from the runway? We're getting that particulate matter. We're getting that aircraft noise. It's like the classic example in St. Charles County. It used to be St. Charles Speedway, right there, 94 and Junk Station Road. And they built the subdivision right next to it, okay? And to the point where people moved into that subdivision, they bought a house in that subdivision like in November, December, January, and the racetrack wasn't running. But then when the racetrack started in April, oh my God, they were so upset. You live next to a racetrack. Guess what? And it's funny. I talked to someone I know the other day and confirming this. They're a second-time homeowner in Chesterfield, recently bought a new place about 3 years ago. And I said, when you bought that house, did you have to sign off on the thing? We've talked about this before. In Chesterfield, if you buy any house in Chesterfield, you have to sign a form that you know the airport is there and you will not take any legal action against the airport for noise. Did you know that?
Yeah, I did know that.
And God, I talked to somebody the other day about this. This is something that you and I maybe should take on a little bit further. This guy is a mortgage guy, and this guy is really good. And he was telling me all the tremendous problems with condos lately. You know about this crazy, weird story?
No, I don't. What's going on?
Well, the condo collapse in Miami. Remember when all those, unfortunately, that whole wing of that condo complex collapsed in the middle of the night, and all those people were killed? He said that now the insurance companies are taking a very hard look at that whole situation. And the reason that collapsed, and it sort of came to that, is that there were structural deficiencies with the condo complex, and that the board decide to just kick the can down the road. We're not going to worry about that. Well, maybe we'll look at that. And part of it was that they wanted the company, the engineering company that said, you got a problem here, problem there. This is going to be $1.2 million. The problem with the condos is that you have what they call assessments. So, you're paying your what is it, maintenance, wherever your condo fees per month. But all of a sudden, if some calamity comes up, they assess an assessment to all the residents in the condos. So that was the deal. So they kept kicking the can down the road. He said this is the exact same thing that's happened with condo complexes. And he said that he told me that in the St. Louis area, any condo complex that's over 40 years old, it's almost impossible to get a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac loan on a condo. You can't typically get the government loans, and it's very, very difficult to get a condo loan on anything over 40 years old. And he talked about the condos were built back in the 70s when they're doing aluminum wiring. They have tremendous problems with that. He told me some unbelievable stories. I'm not condo bashing, but I've never understood the whole condo thing myself. And he said it, and it was pretty interesting. His comment was, you have these condo boards, and you have the people that are on the boards, and the reason they're in a condo is because they don't want to fix things. They don't want to have to cut grass. They don't want to have to fix this. They want to have to that. As a result of that, most of the people on the board are very uneducated about what it takes to maintain a building, and those are the people that are maintaining the buildings. I'm thinking to myself, that's an interesting angle. You know what I'm saying?
That's self-perpetuating, and it selects for people who don't know what they're talking about.
Right. The least qualified people who are running the condo complex are the ones who are making the decision about what structural and repairs need to be made, and upgrades and things like that. Anyway,
wouldn't that be the same concept as people that aren't able to make a serious living going into higher ed and teaching people how to make a living?
Are people going into the radio business expecting to make any money out of it? One of those kind of things.
I guess so. And let's not forget, Brad, that the condo associations are not made up of 89-year-olds who cut their own grass in December.
John,
there's not a lot of Brad Hildebrands walking around the condo associations.
This weekend, temperature on Saturday is supposed to be in the 50s. Matter of fact,
I saw it. It's going to be perfect for you, Brad. I'm going to be out at Carshield Field pouring some cold water over plastic tiles. I got a deal worked out with a slip and fall here outfit. And so I'm gonna go out there and pour the water, and then I'm gonna be standing by the exits with business cards. I'm actually gonna be wearing a sandwich board that says "Slip and Fall." Call Crown and Brupen.
Brown and Crouppen and Onderlaw.
No, Brad, it's Crown and Brupen. Okay, because Brown and Crouppen would be copyright infringement.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay,
I would have to sue UMG along with Ali Jones and the St. Lunatics. I don't want to infringe copyright.
Do you mean to tell me that Brown and Crouppen has copyrighted their name? Is that what you're saying?
I bet they have. By the way, follow up real quick to yesterday's show. Member of the St. Lunatics, Ali Jones, I went to his Instagram. Yeah. Huge Trump supporter.
Really?
Yeah, you wouldn't believe it. If you go to his Instagram, it's all Trump all the time. How great Trump is, how Democrats are lying about everything. Phenomenal.
God, isn't this unbelievable how and go back to 2020 when Joe Biden was on Charlemagne the God show, and if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. Wasn't that the quote?
You ain't black. That's right. Black. I mean, we're breaking down that fortitude just little by little, Brad.
I'm telling you. Okay, John.
Like you're breaking your hip at Carshield Field, Brad.
I think I broke my hip the other day, but that's another story. Okay, and by the way, my doctor told me 2 new hips, but I keep saying, no, I don't want 2 new hips. Because you know why?
Why's that?
Then I'd be too hip.
Oh, hip to be square. Brad, I will see you on Thursday morning.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?